That very idea is proof that our children are probably better off not going to school at all. And there's a reason homeschooling rates are exploding over recent years. I've started calling schools government indoctrination camps precisely for nonsense like this. Unions, who are now, of course, all-powerful in our new socialist Britain, say testing Year 4 children on their times tables is sparking pupil anxiety, and we should stop doing it. They also want to simplify Year 6 SATs tests, that's the exams pupils take at the end of primary school in reading, writing and maths, to cut out the most difficult grammar questions. And I can tell you now that most adults don't even know the difference between there, and not testing children on grammar would be throwing in the towel completely. But more chillingly, claptrap ideas like this, which have been dropped on the desk of Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson, and that she's now actively looking at, is creating a generation of even bigger snowflake adults who couldn't even spell the word backbone, let alone brandish one. No surprise then that the number of children in England being homeschooled has increased by more than 10,000 people last autumn. Stats published by the Department for Education showed 92,000 children were recorded as being homeschooled on one day last term, and that was compared with 80,900 at the same point in autumn 2022. Cue the Education Secretary today then, who warns that parents who allow their children to regularly skip school are significantly denting their future earning potential. Well, do you know what? I'd argue that parents who regularly allow their kids to skip school for, I don't know, ventures abroad, exploring the world, sporty endeavours, or even just time with ever-absent parents will be far more beneficial to them than sitting in a classroom being mollycoddled by the state. And just like with a lot of other public institutions, trust in teachers and our education system now is rapidly falling. So instead of blaming parents, maybe the government should ask itself why parents don't want their children in schools anymore. But let's get the thoughts of my panel tonight. Political commentator Chloe Dobbs, former LBC political editor Theo Usherwood, and former Labour special advisor and columnist Paul Richards. Welcome back, panel. Chloe Dobbs, 7 times 7.
49.
Yes. Theo, 10 times 4.
40.
That's an easy one. Look, this is an absurd proposal from the teaching unions, is it not? Kids dropping times tables, grammar.
I mean, there is so much wrong with our education system, and to think that the cure is getting rid of times tables tests is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, to say that the reason why they want to get rid of them is because people get anxious about doing tests. Well, the way that you get rid of anxiety around doing tests is to do them more often. I mean, the secondary school that I went to, you only did mocks like in February before your GCSEs, and loads of the kids were really nervous in their actual exams, and that has a huge impact on your performance. But then the sixth form I went to, turned out all of the kids there had full, proper GCSE mocks every single summer from year 7, and they were chill as anything when it came to their GCSE exams, and that's why that school performed super well. So this is just... it's just bonkers, and it's, you know, the world's just gone soft. We're so worried about mental health that we can't even put kids through the stress of doing a times tables test.
Yeah. Paul, this idea has been dropped on the desk of Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. Do you think she's going to seriously consider it?
Well, I've no idea, but I do know that you do need kids who can do basic maths and who can spell and use sentences. But you also know need kids who are rounded human beings, who know how to form relationships, who have emotional intelligence, who know something about the world, who can think critically. And not every kid can pass exams, and that's not what it should just be about. And I think things like times tables, I mean, I remember those books of algorithms and things that used to be given. You don't need that anymore in quite the same way.
True.
You know, do you remember the maths teachers that said, well, you won't have a calculator with you, you know, every day?
Oh, yes, I do.
And now we do, you know. So the way we use maths is going to change. And maybe times tables is something we don't really need to know in the same way. On the other hand, being able to spell, yes, we do.
But surely, Theo, times tables is just simple arithmetic. If you're in a shop and you're working out whether you can afford something, or whether you're working out you can afford your mortgage payments after Labour's, you know, whacked up, or the Bank of England rather, has whacked up interest rates, surely that is a basic element of school that you need.
I think it also goes beyond that, Ben, because I think it's also not necessarily teaching children the times table itself, but also teaching children the ability to learn something by rote, and that actually it's quite an important skill to be able to memorise some, you know, a lot of information and be able to store that information and then be able to produce that information when you're asked to recall it at speed. And I think there's a skill set there that goes beyond the times table itself. The one thing I'd say is that, you know, I was at school, 35 years ago doing this. That tells you how old I am. And I was learning my times tables then. And anxiety amongst my peers, myself and my peers, was actually was relatively low. It certainly wasn't as high as it is around with
I was
children
anxious
now.
when he was about to ask me a times table. He left me out, thank heavens, and I was just worried then I was going to get caught out.
You know, the timetables have been, you know, they're the constant with this, and it's the anxiety that's gone up. And I don't see how, if we had, you know, 35 years ago, we had children with much lower anxiety when it came to tests, but we still had times tables, that we're now going to fast forward. We've got children with high anxiety, and you're suddenly going to take times tables out of the equation, excuse the pun, and end up in a situation where you're going to improve anxiety. I'm not quite seeing it.
I've got to say, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm sure it does with social media and stuff, which wasn't around in my day. But I was never anxious as a kid, and I don't remember any of my peers at school ever having problems with anxiety. Paul, 9 times 6.
I've no idea, but I do know that kids did have anxiety, but they didn't have the lexicon. And I think it's good that people can talk about mental health in a different way now than perhaps when we were at school, because all those problems were there, but people just didn't articulate them. So there is something around how kids should be able to talk about their feelings in that way.
Yeah, that's good. I just don't think the solution is to take away the tests altogether. I mean,
no.
I really, really would love to see our education system become far more vocational. I think it would make us much more productive as a country, but also it would give kids kids who are smart but not in the academic sense, the chance to feel that they've got more self-esteem, because I saw so many kids in school who clearly had some amazing talents but not in the academic sense, and that really brought them down because they felt like their worth was measured by how many A stars that they had. I think I teach maths, and I see plenty of kids at GCSE and at GCSE level who really do not need to be learning quadratics. They're never going to use it in their life. They hate it. They're not good at maths, and I think they only really need to study maths until age 12 if they're not a mathematical genius that wants to carry it on.
Terrible.
I think maths and English, get all that right until age 12 and then bring in more vocational skills.
Fair enough.
The other thing I'd say is that I'm not sure that ministers should be listening to trade unions when it comes to the actual curriculum itself. And the reason I say that is the trade unions are there to represent teachers. They're not there to represent the pupils. And I know the retort will come, actually, well, it's the teachers who are the experts in education. But much rather, I think, actually, the smarter thing to do would be to look for the government to figure out where are, like, the most outperforming 20 state schools in the country.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about the highest achieving schools. I'm talking about the schools which are in areas of the country where they shouldn't be doing well. All the statistics when it comes to whether it's deprivation or socioeconomic groups, they shouldn't be doing well. But nonetheless, the head teachers and the directors of studies are getting extraordinary results. And I think it'd be much more sensible for Bridget Phillipson and Keir Starmer to get those 20 best head teachers into a room and start plugging them for ideas rather than listening to perhaps what the trade unions...
Well, the union...
Obviously, they've come up with ideas. I don't doubt that they're valid, but we don't know where they're drawing those ideas from. And I think the Keir Starmer and Bridget Phillipson need to be going after excellence with this.
Well, the unions seem to run things in the early days of this Labour government, don't they? But it's an interesting conversation, especially homeschooling, the rise in homeschooling. I'm having a bit of not a row with my wife, but a discussion about, basically, long story short, my sweetheart boy Jude, he's very good at tennis, he's 4, he plays 3 or 4 times a week. I want him to have, the only time slot he can have an extra lesson in the week is on a school day, and I suggested to my wife, let's just not send him to school for that morning, just the morning, just for an hour or 2. She said, no way, absolutely no what. But my point is, you know, if he's got a chance of being very good at tennis, what's a morning off primary school going to do for him? But anyway.
No, would be on. I mean, homeschooling is becoming much more attractive, but the thing, and I think I would probably, the way the education system is at the moment, unless it changes drastically by the time I think about having kids, I would only have them if I could homeschool them. But most people don't have that opportunity because very few people have enough money for one person to stay at home.
We tried it during COVID, didn't we, Chloe? It was not a happy experience for many parents, I can tell you.
No. I'll ask you about schooling. We've just spoken about it briefly in the conversation before you joined us, but Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary, she's warned that parents are significantly damaging their children's future and their earning potentials by allowing them to regularly skip school. I'm pretty relaxed on this as a parent. I was just mentioned that I'd rather my boy go and practice sport for 1 day a week instead of going to school. Do you think I'm wrong in doing that?
Yes, I do. I think your boy should go and do some sport after school. What I would say is, you know, if we're to make children go to school, as we always have done, and which is quite correct, we should at least make sure that the education is rigorous and vigorous and will stand them in good stead. And, you know, saying they mustn't do spelling or mathematical tests is ridiculous.
What about truancy to kind of aid cheaper holidays, for example? Because...
No, I mean, if you put a cheap holiday before your child's education, that says all it needs to say about your priorities as a parent.
Yeah. OK, got it. I've been told.